Welcome everyone, and thank you for watching. Today we're going to hear from Chaplain Barry Moyer, who is with Caring Hospice Services. Hello, Barry.
Hello, Dean. It's always a great joy to be with you and to see you on this beautiful day.
Yes, this beautiful rainy day.
Beautiful rainy day.
Well, rain makes things grow.
Right, and it's liquid sunshine.
There you go. Oh, I never heard of that one. I like that.
Thank you.
My goodness. How long have you been a hospice chaplain?
I'm in my 13th year, and in April I'll complete that and begin my 14th.
How wonderful. I know you've done so many wonderful things for people and helped them through so many bad times and good times.
It's been a wonderful journey for me, and I'm still amazed at how much I learn each time I come across a new client, a family, various situations. Every time it's something new.
Yes, it is. And we learn from each other, don't we?
We definitely do. And I think if you have that mindset of openness, you do learn.
Talk a little bit about hospice.
Hospice is one of those wonderful benefits provided by our government under the Medicare program, where people, when they reach the end of life, in the sense that they have an illness that can no longer be treated medically with interventions, where either the family decides or the doctor may approach the family that it might be the wisest choice at this time, instead of causing injections and medicine and all various kinds of aggressive treatments, to allow the person just to die in peace, surrounded by family and friends, instead of being hauled off to the hospital, to the doctors for various tests. And you know, I've often been amazed at how peaceful most people are when that decision is made, because they know that they no longer have to go through various tests, and sometimes the anxiety that even those tests create for people, not only the patient but also for family members.
Yeah, I think a person really understands when it's time to meet its maker, don't you?
Yeah, I think almost innately with the people that I met, they know that things are not getting better, things are getting worse, and their time is coming and approaching. And most people, because they had that innate ability to know, make peace with people around them, they finish the business that they need to finish, and usually it's a good ending, a good closing.
I think that's the reason it's so necessary for people to have things drawn up and prepare for a time like this. You know, you prepare for vacations.
Absolutely.
And the last thing that you can ever do for yourself is to say how you would like to leave this world as we know it.
Exactly. One of the nice things about hospice is between the social worker, the nurse, and the chaplain, we try to broach those subjects that are probably the most difficult to broach, like, do you have a directive? You know, so that we know, you know, the family knows what your wishes are. Do you want to be resuscitated if your heart stops? Do you want to be intubated if you can no longer breathe? Do you want to go to the hospital if the interventions at home don't work? And to have that advanced directive is really beneficial for the patient, for the family, for the hospice team, for the doctor. Also then to broach the subject about what their wishes are to do with their body once they've left this earth. And though they're not always the easiest subjects, it's amazing how easy they usually are to engage once that subject's broached.
Do people really wait until the last minute mostly, don't they? Do they use directives that much?
The advanced directive?
Yes.
A lot of, you know, I'd say there's about 50% of the people that have been well prepared, probably for years, when their minds were clear and they didn't have all the other influences of declining health, where they've made their choices. Other folks, yeah, they've kind of waited till the very last minute to make those decisions.
Is that right?
And it's really tough on families when the patient themselves haven't made those wishes known, to have to decide whether or not to resuscitate, not to resuscitate, to intubate, not to intubate, or to send to the hospital.
Unless the patient has already specified.
That's right.
And even without a directive, a patient can specify.
As long as the patient's cognitive and has capacity, the ability to make their wishes known, absolutely.
Yeah, that's true. I know there's so much about that people think that the patient doesn't have the last word, but the patient does.
They do. It often amazes me how many times people think when they become the power of attorney for someone that they love, that they get to make all the decisions. They don't.
No.
As long as that person has the ability or the capacity to make their own decisions, that power of attorney means nothing.
Who determines if they still have the capacity to make the decision?
Hopefully it never comes to the place where a judge has to make that decision. Hopefully the person who can make the capacity is able to make those decisions so that the family members know that they're making that decision. Sometimes family members make those decisions because the patient or the person who's ill themselves no longer want to make those decisions. But that advance directive really helps guide them, directs them. Now, the interesting thing about an advance directive is if you're in a facility, whatever that facility may be, an assisted living, residential, skilled nursing, even though you have that advance directive, it still takes a doctor's order before that advance directive the patient's wishes can be honored.
Oh my. I never really realized that.
Yeah, so
before.
I might have as my wishes, do not resuscitate. I go into a skilled nursing facility until a doctor can write an order according to my wishes. I'm full code.
My word.
Mm-hmm.
So a doctor has the last word?
The doctor really is the person who makes the final call as far as do not resuscitate, do not hospitalize. But the advance directive gives guidance to that doctor, and I don't know of a doctor that I've ever met who doesn't honor those advance directives.
They would have to do that, I'm sure.
But there may be a lapse of time between the time you enter into a facility. Right.
That's what I was thinking about. Mm-hmm. Now, you say there are 4 people to help with the hospice. There's the social worker. What does she do?
The social worker really helps the family deal with some of the issues we just talked about, like the advance directive. Is there a funeral home? Do they need assistance financially if they're in a skilled nursing facility? To help work through some of the legal jargon and some of the legal territory that needs to be covered or hopefully can be covered before the patient dies.
Okay, and how about the nurse aide?
The nurse aide really cares for the personal needs of the patient, whether that's bathing, if there's incontinence, taking care of the personal needs of that individual. And of course that varies depending on how sick or how able the patient themselves might be.
And the nurse?
The nurse is the general overseer. She's the case manager, or he's the case manager, working in cooperation with the patient's personal physician. And that nurse, because they see with their eyes and are there involved, usually make the recommendations to the doctor. Then the doctor gives the verbal and the written orders so that the patient's needs might be met medically.
And you, chaplain.
And the chaplain's there to provide spiritual and emotional support. And sometimes it's more about eyes and ears than it is about speaking. I often tell people that as a pastor I did a lot of talking. Probably I should have done more listening. But as a chaplain, you're doing more listening than you are talking. And in that listening, then you can be reflective in the way that you might respond to a person who's speaking to you or sharing with you some of their innermost needs.
I want to bring back something personal.
Mm-hmm.
I think, I don't know how it ever happened. I guess the doctor called for hospice in my case. And you came in, and I was not at all pleased or polite. What did I say? I was trying to remember.
I don't really fully remember the entire situation, other than I had made an appointment to come to your house, and that particular day you were out with your husband, and you saw me at the house, and you wanted to know what in the world I was doing there at the house. You had forgotten, I believe, that I was coming, but it seemed as though from there on in we just meshed very well in caring for the needs of both your mother and your husband.
Yes, I know. I think I was annoyed
Hmm.
and not very polite, but of course I was under a terrific amount of stress at the time, which you understood.
Sure,
You run into all kinds of stress.
sure. It's an amazing thing how, hospice and the end of life issues can affect us emotionally.
Mm-hmm.
And I think most of the time I'm pretty well in check myself. But I've had some experiences over the last few weeks and months too that have caused my emotions to kind of dictate my persona and the way I responded to situations and circumstances and the people that were trying to help care for me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
Well, that's good because now you have gone full knowledge.
That's right. From head knowledge to heart knowledge,
right.
and bringing those two together hopefully will help me better serve the people that I come in contact with.
I know it. I think it'll make you much stronger, although you are very strong, and I think it'll give you a different perspective.
It does. I think back to many years ago, I always thought of death as a medical event that may have had some spiritual implications. But after these past 13 years, I really believe that death or dying in death is more of a spiritual event with medical implications. And that's why I think the chaplaincy or the spiritual support in hospice is so important. Because many people who have never darkened the doors of a synagogue or a temple or a church, when it comes to the end of life, they begin to realize that there's something more about who we are than just the physical, the mental, the emotional, that there is a spiritual component. May not be just like the one I have or the one you have, but there's something there that's different about life than just the emotions or the physical.
I always felt that I was a spiritual person, but not a religious person.
Mm-hmm.
I think a religious person belongs to a church,
Mm-hmm.
but a spiritual person belongs to the universe.
Sure. And I think sometimes when I think about religious people, they probably are individuals who are more attached to an organized institutional religious body. And I don't mean to demean that in any way,
No.
shape, or form. But I think a spiritual person has a relationship with who they really are, and maybe I could say to the Creator or to the earth, and to that which lies beyond what we can see and touch and feel and smell.
Well, Chaplain, give us an example of some of these things.
Okay, I think as I've gone through some of the situations in my own life and with other clients, I think about the importance of Hebrew tradition. And in Hebrew tradition, the importance of remembering the person who has passed is so important. And many of us who are not Jewish don't recognize the value of such a thing as a little rock. And of course, this is earthly, but I often am amazed when I go to the Jewish section of cemeteries that on top of the tombstones or the markers, I often find many stones or rocks or maybe smaller pebbles like this laying on top of that tombstone. Now in the Hebrew or from the Old Testament, that rock would be called an Ebenezer, a stone or a rock of remembrance. And when I see those on top of the tombstones, I'm reminded that that person who's been gone is not forgotten. And oftentimes we forget the people who've laid the road or the pathway for us in the present. I think that's a very important
That
part
is very
of
sweet.
life.
Mhm. I like that idea.
Because all of us want to be remembered.
Oh, yes.
We do. And isn't it interesting that as you gather together with those who still remain, the stories that can be told about the person who's already passed?
Yes. Mhm.
Sometimes we do that while they're still alive. And I think sometimes our funeral should be before we die than after we die so that we might hear what people are going to say about us. And then another thing that I've come across, and this is manufactured here in Boyertown, by a local businessman, Randy Doty, who has been heavily involved in real estate but has a very sensitive spiritual heart. And calls that a glass tear, and he's written a poem. It's called The Sea of Tears. May I read it?
Please.
Okay. The sea of tears before you, a course you now must take. We shall stand beside you this voyage as you make. The task that we have chosen to face the sea of grief, we stand with those in sorrow and offer some relief. As you begin this journey, we share this tear of glass, a tear of true compassion, forever it shall last. When sorrow may engulf you, embrace this simple tear, reach to those who love you, and ask them to draw near. The sea of tears before you has a distant shore, a land of pleasant memories of those who go before.
Very beautiful. Very beautiful. This has been a wonderful thing for you to come and tell us all about hospice. Chaplain Moyer, thank you so very much.
Thank you, Dean. Always great to see you.
That was very nice. Thank you very much for watching.